Welcome back to Real Talk Twin Cities. This is your host, Cheryl Kempenick with Coldwell Banker Burnett, along with my co-host,
Eric Pirius, Bell Mortgage.
We are here every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. bringing you local expert advice on all things real estate. And you can reach us anytime at our website, realtalktwincities.com. Lawmakers in both parties are on the lookout for tax revenue, and they have their eye on the mortgage interest tax deduction. The housing market has been on the mend, and taking away a key tax break could throw a wrench into home buying plans and hurt the recovery. It is estimated that the elimination of this tax deduction could reduce home values by as much as 15%. The Minnesota Association of Realtors is working hard lobbying our legislatures to protect this important deduction. We are lucky to have with us today the Vice President of Political Affairs from the Minnesota Association of Realtors, Christine Berger. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you.
Christine, can you explain what the mortgage interest deduction is?
Sure. The mortgage interest deduction is, as you mentioned, a tax benefit for homeowners. And it's actually a remarkably effective tool to foster and to bring on more home ownership in Minnesota.
And you know, that's something that we talk about all the time, the difference between renting versus owning. Eric
Right.
and I just talked about this on our show last week.
That's right, yep. It's one of the biggest deductions that most middle-class folks have.
And isn't it about 50% of homeowners are using that interest deduction?
That's true. A fun little fact about Minnesota is that there are 1.5 million homes in Minnesota. And based on returns from the Minnesota Department of Revenue, that we know about half of them are itemizing and using that deduction. But if you think about it, I think a more impressive number to look at is how many people with a mortgage are actually using the deduction, because that's really the target, is the people with a mortgage. And so there's a little over 1 million homeowners in Minnesota with a mortgage, and but approximately 2/3 of those homeowners with a mortgage are itemizing and using this important deduction. So it has a profound impact on Minnesota's real estate economy.
So 1/3 aren't using it? Is that because they don't know about it or some other reason? Or I can't imagine why you wouldn't.
So for those people who don't have a mortgage, obviously it doesn't
Right,
apply to them.
right.
Then there are those that have a mortgage that aren't itemizing, and it could be that the standard deduction is higher for them. Perhaps they don't have children, they're not itemizing and deducting other things.
I see.
Something to that effect.
Or their mortgage could be getting down to the end, so there isn't that much interest.
Right.
But
I see.
boy, I know when I look at my tax returns and the interest that I'm paying, I've done the calculations, and if the mortgage interest deduction was taken away from me, that would mean that my taxes would be going up about $5,000 a year.
Right,
And
right.
that's painful.
Yeah, when you're buying a home, it seems like monopoly money. You know, you'll hear a realtor or a loan officer talk about, and you can deduct the interest, and you know, it doesn't really have an impact until the end of the year when you have that $5,000, I don't know, it's some $3,000 to $5,000 deduction that you didn't have previously. And I think that ties in with what you're talking about and why it's so valuable to homeowners, isn't that right?
That's right. Individuals are permitted to deduct the interest that they pay on their mortgage debt up to a maximum, and you can take it not only on your primary residence, but if you have a second home like a cabin, you can use it there as well.
And that really would be painful to us too, if we start seeing people not being able to afford their second home by losing that deduction. Christine, can you explain the history of the mortgage interest deduction?
Sure. It actually goes back over 100 years ago. Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1913, which created a general offset for all interest on indebtedness. And you know, while the tax code has changed over the years, 20 years after that, the Minnesota tax code conformed to the federal tax code, and so we brought it onto not only at the federal income tax level, but at the state income tax level as well. So as the ebbs and flows of legislators come and go and parties change, obviously our tax code has changed over the 100 years and the 80 years here in Minnesota that we've had the mortgage interest deduction, but it has withstand the test of time because it is so important and valued here in Minnesota and federally as well. So it still exists, and thank goodness it does, because it really provides an incentive for home ownership, and that's such a thing that Minnesotans really believe in. Home ownership provides a strong tax base for local governments. It provides a strong and healthy community that you live in. It provides, people have shown over and over again that children who live in home ownership environments do better in school. And it provides shelter and safety, and it's where you can create your memories at home. So it's such a valuable resource, it's such a valuable tool to have homeownership in our communities. And so this tax break, this tax incentive for homeowners is so important, and that's why we're engaging in this campaign to protect and preserve homeownership and the mortgage interest deduction in Minnesota.
It's amazing that a program that's been in place for 100 years would even be considered to be eliminated at this point. Anything you can add as far as the impact of losing the mortgage interest deduction?
Yeah, as you mentioned, our national economists are estimating that if this were to be modified, that tax deductions on home ownership, we could lose a market value of up to 15%. And as we've just seen through the Great Recession, we know what that means to a lot of people, and we don't want to go through that again. So again, that's another reason why we are going through this campaign and trying to protect and preserve the mortgage interest deduction. And as I mentioned, there are so many Minnesotans that are itemizing and using this deduction that any changes to the deduction would really have a negative impact on our real estate market.
Boy, I agree. And the funny thing is, when I'm out there working with clients, nobody's even heard of this issue. People don't even realize that this is on the chopping block. What can we do to help save the mortgage interest deduction?
Thanks. We have this campaign called Minnesota Homes Matter, and we are having, we're doing outreach to legislators and outreach to homeowners to educate them about the importance of the tax deduction for homeownership. And so members listening or people listening to the radio show can go onto our website. That's mnhomesmatter.com. That's MN like the state, mnhomesmatter.com. They can go online and they can sign the petition, which sends a pre-drafted letter to their legislator saying that they believe in the mortgage interest deduction. It also gives you an opportunity on our website to join our coalition, or you can just put your name on a page and show it. That way we can show numbers, strengthen numbers. If you want to refer a friend, if you're listening right now and say, hey, I know someone who might care about this issue, they might be worried about losing their mortgage interest deduction, you can refer that friend and we'll contact them and ask them if they'd like to join our coalition or sign the petition as well.
Well, and we also have put the link on our website, realtalktwincities.com, and it's very easy to do. I was on your website and I filled it out, and it's just reassuring to know that my voice is being heard with my legislature, that we want to keep this important mortgage interest tax deduction. The other thing too that I look at with all of the problems that we've seen in the real estate market over the past 10 years is if this is taken away and if property values do start to decline because we are losing buyers who see the value in purchasing, because there won't be that much difference between renting versus owning financially, it's going to bring in more investors because they'll be buying up the properties at lower prices, and they're still going to want to retain their return on investment, which could mean higher rents to renters. So the people that this hurts the most is the middle class.
Right.
It's the people that can't afford to pay cash for a home. They need to get a deduction. Eric, how do you feel about that?
Well, I've heard this floated previously. There's been talk of taking away the mortgage deduction, but basically it's a political suicide for anybody to do that, and that was my impression up until quite recently. And in preparing for the show and reading the statistics, so it's been proposed, and so it's a real threat this time.
Indeed. We've seen legislation come out of the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate, but we've also seen it come out of the federal level as well. And there's really, the attack is coming from both sides. Both the Republicans and the Democrats have come up with proposals to modify the mortgage interest deduction. They have different means to their end, but it's being attacked on a bipartisan basis. So we're really doing this educational campaign on a proactive basis to educate homeowners about the importance of it.
So you say modify. So I think of it's gone, right? But so maybe just reducing it. Is that kind of what's on the table, or both, or?
We're seeing a bit of everything.
Okay.
We're seeing all elimination. We're seeing changing it into some type of smaller tax credit. We're seeing it being the maximum of amount you can of debt that you can take on the interest section being capped. So there's a plethora of ideas out there about how to reduce your burden, your tax break.
And we know that politicians listen to feedback that they get from their constituents, which is us. And so it's pretty easy then to have your voice heard on mnhomesmatter.com.
It's very easy. Signing that petition will take it goes a long way. It sends a letter to your legislator letting them know that you, their constituent, care about this issue
Right.
and you want to protect your tax benefit.
So not only current homeowners or potential homeowners, but also renters, which Cheryl talked about the potential for rents going up. So all of those folks that want to keep this in place should consider going to mnhomesmatter.com and having their voice heard.
That'd be great.
All right.
We've been talking with Christine Berger, the Vice President of Political Affairs at the Minnesota Board of Realtors, and we've been discussing the important issue of the mortgage interest deduction. And we want to invite you to visit realtalktwincities.com and help support this important issue. Eric, what's coming up?
Well, in the next segment, I'm going to spend some time talking about renting versus own, the cost of waiting. Once again, that wild 2 days we had last week and what that means for interest rates. A little bit about the overall economy. And the fact that you can get a loan, dispel some myths for us. And then after that, we'll have kind of a open forum for discussion. Hopefully we'll cover some things that are interest to everybody. So stick with us on Real Talk Twin Cities, AM 1280 The Patriot.